Yeah.
I noticed his tie was.
I don't know why I wore wool. Yeah. Drop.
Here you go.
Hey everyone, I'm Ron De Jesus, Field Chief Privacy Officer at Transcend. The following is a conversation with Tom Kemp, Executive Director at the California Privacy Protection Agency, better known as CalPrivacy. Tom has spent his career at the intersection of technology, consumer protection, and public service, and played a pivotal role in shaping how California turns privacy policy into practice. I'm excited to talk to Tom about the rollout of the Delete Act, the groundbreaking delete request and opt-out platform, or DROP, which allows Californians to delete their personal data from data brokers with a single request. This is Transcend Field Trips. Tom, thank you so much for joining me here in California, where we get to talk about all things California privacy.
Well, thanks for having me here, Ron.
I am so excited to talk about DROP, the Delete Act. And I actually wanted to first start, Tom, with your journey. I know you've been in tech. You're an entrepreneur. Now you're leading the nation's largest privacy regulator. Can you talk to me a little bit about your journey from kind of owning your own tech company and now being the executive director at the CPPA or CalPrivacy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So had the traditional Silicon Valley, started at a big company. I started my career at Oracle, and then eventually started getting into startups. And then it led to me being a founder and CEO of a cybersecurity company. And what I saw firsthand was these incredibly large breaches of personal information. And so clearly unauthorized access, but it really started getting me thinking about, well, how do you govern the actual data itself? Who has rights on the personal information that businesses have? And then my company got big enough that we actually had to go through GDPR compliance. And it started leading me to think like, hey, Europe has this. What's going on in the United States? Why don't we have a comprehensive federal privacy law?
Right.
And so in 2020, when the California Privacy Rights Act, Prop 24, came up for the voters, I jumped at the opportunity to volunteer. And then since then, I did a bunch of policy work with state legislators, and then eventually led me to writing a book on privacy and other tech guardrails that are required. And then when this opportunity came up, I jumped at it to run the California Privacy Protection Agency, or CalPrivacy. This represented the first time ever that privacy was on the ballot, that people could vote on, yes, I want more privacy. And so I really jumped at that opportunity to volunteer. And in that campaign, I, in effect, was the chief marketing officer. So I was really like the first person to market privacy to people to vote for it. And the good news is that overwhelmingly, people voted for Prop 24. 9.3 million Californians voted yes to enhance their privacy, to create this agency, the CalPrivacy Agency. And 9.3 million is more people than 10 or 15 states in the United States.
Sure.
It's more in 2020, the 9.3 million votes were more than Kamala Harris got here in California, a native Californian, in 2024. So
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it just tells you the desire that everyday people have to take control of their personal information. And so that's really become, over the last 5-6 years, really become something important for me. And now I get to see it through as leading this agency.
That's incredible. I do know that California has always been at the forefront of privacy, starting with CalOPA, for example, and I believe it was the first state to actually require privacy policies on websites. So it's a thrilling state to be in, of course, and that figure of over 9 million people voting for their privacy rights is incredible. Again, I want to step back a bit, Tom, and focus a little bit on your tech entrepreneurial spirit, if you will. How did your operational background actually help you in the role that you are in today as executive director?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, to be an entrepreneur and be a CEO, you need to manage people. And so I was able to build my cybersecurity company to over 500 people. So
Wow.
I think I have a good idea of what it takes to build a high-performing team, manage them. It's clearly a team effort to deliver like the results that we're delivering here with CalPrivacy. I also understand that you need to evangelize. And that's an important part of being a tech entrepreneur is getting out there, communicating. And so it's clear that we have to communicate to consumers to raise privacy literacy and raise awareness for the tools that are available to better protect their personal information. But it's also equally important because we do regulate businesses that they need to know, what their obligations are under the California Consumer Privacy Act or CCPA. And so that's also a big, aspect is the public affairs aspect of the agency as well.
100%.
So those are the types of things that that the experience that I've gotten being a tech entrepreneur has led and helped me in this role as an executive director. I should also say that I'm probably one of the first people in a regulatory role that in a professional life has had to go through GDPR compliance. So I've actually kind of, walked the walk with the business that I had.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm obviously now talking the talk. So I've walked a mile in the shoes of businesses in terms of, how do you go through, meeting the regulatory compliance requirements that laws such as GDPR or CCPA mandate.
I really love that you touch upon, Tom, the importance of evangelism, because as much as, the CCPA requires a privacy policy, a lot of regular lay persons, consumers, everyday folk aren't going to really understand what's in a privacy policy. So I love that the fact that with Drop specifically, which we'll get into later, you're going on a roadshow, you're really helping both businesses and consumers understand their rights and the actual benefits of using a system like Drop. So I love the evangelism piece. I'm all for it, obviously, as field CPO. Let's actually dive in to the Delete Act, Tom. Can you give me a little bit of an overview of the Delete Act and how you got involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Delete Act is SB 362. It was passed in 2023.
Okay.
The author was State Senator Josh Becker. And the law itself was signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, right? So it happened a couple years ago. And the genesis of it, it's not an original idea, to be perfectly candid. So Senator Wyden had some proposals at the federal level.
Sure. Yep.
Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, in a editorial that he wrote in 2019, talked about a need for a data broker clearinghouse where people could make requests. And then there was a federal proposal by Senator Cassidy, who's a Republican, and Senator Ossoff, who's a Democrat, called the Delete Act. So it's not even an original name, right? So it's
a good one, though.
It's a good one. It's a proposal at the federal level. And I had actually worked with Senator Becker advising him on a bill in 2022. It actually didn't make it through the legislative process, but Senator Becker, to his credit, got really excited about how can we better regulate the data broker industry. And I said, well, if you really want to go big, there's this federal idea called the Delete Act, and it would actually be perfect for California here to address the issues and concerns that consumers have. And so he took it upon himself, and I advised him throughout that process. And it was a very hard-fought battle, because whenever you try to regulate an industry and put some guardrails around, there's going to be pushback. But at the same time, to credit industry, they gave good feedback, and we made it through that legislative process a better bill. And so we were very fortunate that this is really the first and only kind of its law in the world, not only just in the United States, but the actual world, that gives the ability for consumers to go to a single website and say, please delete my information, and have that happen for hundreds of entities that we call data brokers.
Is that the gist of the Delete Act? Is that kind of the TLDR, providing a platform to delete from data brokers? Or are there other kind of rights that the Delete Act affords consumers? Or is that the main one?
Well, there's actually a bunch of things. So the first of which is that there was historically a data broker registry that was administered by the California Attorney General. That also was not an original idea in California. The first one for a registry was in Vermont. So that moved the registry from the Attorney General over to CalPrivacy. And then from there, it required the agency to build what's called an accessible deletion mechanism. That is this website, this platform where consumers can verify their residency, put some basic information, hit submit, and then data brokers eventually will have to consult the actual system itself, do matching and do the deletions. But also there's a furtherance of the rights that people have. So the current right to delete in California is data collected from the consumer. That's what that's the obligation that a business has if a consumer exercises their CCP right to delete. So that it turns out a lot of data brokers don't collect data from the consumer.
It's indirect.
And so the deletions, if you made a deletion request, it could be very possible that a data broker may come back and say, well, actually, I didn't collect anything from you, so I'm going to keep all your data. And that is a mismatch with a consumer's expectation for what a right to delete is.
100%.
And so the deletion under the Delete Act actually is not only data collected from the consumer, but about a consumer as well. So that is a step up. And in fact, we actually are working with Senator Becker with a new bill called the Expanding Privacy Rights Act, SB 923, that it just has been introduced to actually up-level the right to delete for CCPA deletion request, and actually harmonize our deletion request with the vast majority of other states. So that's another kind of net new privacy right. The other net new benefit that Delete Act has is that under CCPA, that if you do a right to delete, it's a deletion at that point in time. But then data can be repopulated in the databases of data brokers. It's not a permanent delete. So what happens is the consumer has to rinse and repeat and go back and make another request. But the fundamental issue that the Delete Act addresses is that it's just too difficult for an average person to contact hundreds of data brokers and make a request to delete their information. Now, just take that it may take 20 or 30 minutes per request per data broker. And we now have over 500 data brokers registered with the state of California.
That's a lot of data brokers.
So if you multiply 20 or 30 minutes times 500, that's 10 days of work that an average person would have to do to make the request for deletions. And then they would have to repeat it, say 6, 9 months, a year later, et cetera. And so what this really does with the Delete Act at the core fundamental heart of the matter is it enables the exercise of privacy rights at scale. It allows people for the first time to really operationalize their desire to take control over their personal information.
That's really important at scale, right? Because I actually use a test, Tom, where I basically assess the ease of, whether it's the right to delete or access information by using my mom as a guinea pig. I actually have her go through her privacy rights because she's a layperson. She's not a privacy pro. So I think it's such a great point that, CalPrivacy has formulated a way that an everyday Californian can engage in their privacy rights specific to data brokers. But, obviously data brokers have a lot of personal information on you. So I think it's such a great way to engage with the kind of layperson community. But let's dive into Drop. We've mentioned it several times, the delete request and opt-out platform. What's the TLDR on that? What kind of led you to actually develop an app or a platform specific to deletion from data brokers?
Well, it's required by the law. So,
other than legal requirements.
So it's in the statute itself. But look, it fundamentally goes to the issue that unfortunately with the current model that we have here in the United States, the onus is on the consumer to actually constantly have to exercise their privacy rights. And so there's something called the privacy paradox that people talk about, which just the TLDR on that is that people will say that consumers talk the talk about privacy. Oh, I want a better control. I don't want my information being used. But then they do actions that are counter to that. And so therefore, people will conclude that people really don't care about their privacy.
Like clicking accept on cookies, for example.
Exactly.
Or clicking OK on a terms of service.
Because they just want to get to the service itself, right? And or they're confronted with a 20-page privacy notice, and no one's going to sit there and read. And the reality is, to actually work and be part of today's modern digital economy, you can't opt out of a lot of services. It's just like you're kind of forced into it because everyone else are on these large platforms. Right. And so my thesis is that people do really care about privacy, as evidenced by the fact that 9.3 million people voted for Prop 24, the California Privacy Rights Act that amended the CCPA. But privacy is too difficult to implement at scale. Professor Solov calls it a never-ending set of chores that people have to do. And when you're presented with you always, every time you visit a website, you got to scroll down, you got to do this with cookies, blah, 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 blah. Or to get your data deleted from data brokers, you have to consult a registry and you have to make manual requests. People are going to be like, who's got time for that now, right? So I think the core fundamental vision behind the Delete Act was that, especially in this particular industry, that these are entities that we don't have a direct relationship with, that we are their product, our data. Right. They don't sell things to us. And if people are going to be monetizing our personal information in this way, that we should have the power in bulk, in mass, at scale, however you want to say it, to be able to say, no, I do not want to have my data sold to anyone with a credit card from these types of companies as well. So that's kind of the core, which is addressing the privacy paradox by enabling privacy at scale and making privacy easier.
When a Californian goes on Drop and submits a request, what does success look like to you, Tom, in terms of them effectuating their rights? Yeah.
So what Californians should do is you go to privacy.ca.gov and the main hero banner is the Drop system. Right. So you click on that and you need to quickly verify your residency. So unfortunately, this is only available to people in California. But we have gotten a lot of interest from people in other states wanting to see this type of system. And we can talk maybe more about that later. Then they put some basic information in after they verify their residency. They put in their email address, and we do multi-factor authentication to verify it. Same thing with their phone number, their date of birth, their zip code. They could even potentially put in their mobile advertising ID on their phone or the VIN number, and they hit submit. Okay. And it's not going to be until August that the data brokers match their records with the information in the Drop system itself. But come the fall, when the deletions start occurring, what is the end goal of what we're trying to accomplish is that consumers' digital footprint, the records that are now being sold to anyone with a credit card by hundreds of entities, that there's a dramatic reduction of those records out there, because that is the will of the people participating in it as well. And the downstream benefits could be a reduction in text spam or email spams, because your email and phone numbers are being sold to again, there's not as much credentialing of who's actually buying the system. Some of the data brokers, unfortunately, have been hacked. And so there's large pools of our personal information floating around on the dark web, et cetera. Obviously, we can't control what's happened in the past, but on a move forward basis, by having fewer entities have your information, it should be a reduction in text and email spam. It should lead to a reduction in identity theft, and it should lead to a reduction in the potentialities of having your personal information being weaponized against you. By putting your mobile advertising ID, for example, into the drop system, then that will reduce your device identity from being sold. And the reason, one of the main reasons is that people track your location,
100%.
right? So maybe that could reduce your information being sold to, say, government bodies. Oftentimes, that pricing that you see is based on your personal information.
Right.
It's called surveillance pricing,
Yeah.
right? And so, we've seen instances where people, look at a price of a ticket and then they go to a different computer and it's a different price right there. And it's because some entities are leveraging data from data brokers to say, well, he's more likely to buy at a higher price, things of that nature based on his demographics or her demographics, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot of downstream benefits. Now, take into account data brokers do good stuff as well. So, for example, they help facilitate personalization of ads. So you'll get less personalization of ads. And I know some people like personalized ads, et cetera. So you need to make that judgment call. Sure. We talk about the strengths and the weaknesses or the benefits and the cons of potentially doing this. But overall, I really think that people, for the most part, are saying to themselves, look, I don't have a direct relationship with these entities. That's by the nature, the very definition of a data broker. And because in a data broker ecosystem, I am the product, my data is the product, that I don't want that being monetized. I don't want that being sold to anyone. I don't want my phone number or my email address all of a sudden going to, hundreds or thousands of downstream customers of data brokers. I want to shut that off. And that's the appeal of the delete request and opt-out platform, which is the accessible deletion mechanism that was called forth in SB 362 for us to build and implement.
That's great, Tom. And I really want to hit on this concept of, from a consumer perspective, what's important to them is that they have a sense of choice, right?
Yeah.
You had mentioned that, for example, some folks might like personalized ads, but many people don't. So I think Drop is a way of effectuating that choice around my data. Yes, I understand that my data needs to be productized and monetized, but at least I have some sense of, ownership of that by effectuating my choice on a platform like Drop. Switching gears a little bit, Tom, to the business side, I know we at Transcend have been getting a lot of questions around, from our prospects around how am I a data broker? How is your platform addressing the requirements of Drop? Any tips or, just general guidance for companies that are maybe sensing that they might be subject to Delete Act requirements or that are thinking about registering for the Drop platform? Any just high level guidance for those companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I first will caveat that I don't know the specifics about each individual case.
Sure.
So they should rely on entities such as yourself, their general counsel, outside privacy counsel as well. But here's the deal. We've tried very hard to clearly document what a data broker is and what the definition is. And that's in the statute itself. Furthermore, we've put forth regulations to provide additional clarification. So the Drop regulations were approved last year. They went into effect January 1st.
Okay.
And so there was questions of what's the definition of direct relationship? Because a data broker is an entity, a business that does not have a direct relationship with the consumer and turns around and sells the consumer consumers' personal information to third parties. And so that's the definition. There are some carve-outs that are actually in the statute, the SB 362, but the regulations themselves further define and document what a direct relationship is, et cetera. So my advice is to look at the drop regulations, look at the statute, and make the determination whether or not the business is a data broker or not. I should point out that with the enhanced regulations that we have, that even though you may have a first-party relationship with a consumer, say you collected a consumer's email address for something, then you went out and using that email address, you went out and bought from third parties their additional personal information, and then you take that and package that up and then turn around and sell it to other entities. Under the regulations, you're actually a data broker as well. Just because you got a little piece of information in a direct relationship, then take all this third-party information and then turn around and then sell it, it makes you a data broker as well. But the deletion process itself, when people make the deletion, you just have to delete the third-party information, not the first-party direct interaction that you have. So that's why you have an entity such as General Motors that has actually registered as a data broker. Clearly, people have direct relationships with a car manufacturer. They bought the car, et cetera. But it turns out for business reasons that General Motors supplements that information with third-party information, turns around and sells it. So they're registered as a data broker. So that's maybe a little bit more granular example that people should take into account. So,
no, I love that example, Tom, and getting into the weeds of, so you mentioned data enrichment, and I think we've been getting questions around, hey, I enrich my data with third-party, information that I might be purchasing from brokers, and I think some of the other questions that we're getting are around, again, not selling it for whatever reason, but using it for internal purposes. I think there's a bit of a gray area when it comes to that enrichment piece. So I love that you went into the weeds a little bit. Segueing now into, I know the drop platform was just kind of rolled out, but what do you see in terms of a 5-year roadmap, in terms of enhancements or anything that you might want to change in V2, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're clearly constantly looking at the type of feedback we're getting from consumers, the type of feedback we're getting from businesses, and we will make enhancements to it. Furthermore, the data broker registry, as amended by SB 361 that passed last year and was signed by the governor, asks for additional information that the data brokers need to supply to us as part of the registration. One question in particular was, what other unique identifiers associated with consumers do you collect? And we will do analysis of this year's registrations to see if there's additional information that data brokers are keen off of. And if it then makes sense for us to add additional information to the fields associated with the drop form that consumers fill out to kind of collect those usages of specific pieces of personal information. We may also enhance the type of information that we request from consumers. Now, clearly, a consumer can just simply go in there, put their name in, and just say, here's my email address. And that's it. They don't have to put in their phone number, their VIN, their mobile advertising ID. Some people want to put as much information in to get as many matches as possible out there. So it's really up to the consumer how they want to use this. And if they simply just want to focus on, say, for example, their phone number, that's all they need to put in there because they may see value associated with not having as many third-party entities selling their phone number.
Now I'm going to get to a little bit of a juicy bit, Tom, and a lot of privacy pros have asked me to ask you this question. But just in terms of looking forward in terms of enforcement priorities, will data brokers be on the agenda? And in addition to kind of drop maybe enforcement or delete act enforcement, can you talk a little bit about CalPrivacy's kind of enforcement agenda in general?
No.
I tried. I'm sorry.
You tried. No, exactly. No, look. No, I'm just joking here. So I'll give you some color commentary on this. And so, we certainly don't reveal tactics, how we're going about it. But I will say the following. First and foremost, consumer complaints are very important to us. And since inception, we've gotten 10,000 complaints. And one of our more recent enforcement actions actually came about from a consumer complaint. So one of our tactics, one of our agendas as it relates to enforcement is to be listening to Californians, listening to their complaints.
Right.
And if we start seeing specific trends or egregious violations of the California Consumer Privacy Act or the Delete Act, we're going to move forward on that as well. And we've given examples, right? The second thing is that we have a very strong technology team. We've hired a number of PhDs and technologists. And so they're going to be looking at, key privacy harms, and they're going to be out there testing mobile apps, websites, looking at data flows, et cetera, to identify if there's specific privacy harms being caused out there. The third is that, we do look at media. We see that there could be articles about specific privacy harms or entities out there that, may be causing angst among consumers. We're certainly going to take that into account. So those are some of the things that kind of inform what's going on in terms of, what motivates and what drives us. But I also want to make very clear, as part of answering your question for businesses and not joking, is that we try to be very transparent to businesses in terms of what our priorities are.
Okay.
And we do this in a number of ways. First, we come out with enforcement advisories.
Yes.
And so recently we did come out with an enforcement advisory as it relates to data broker registration, providing additional clarification about if you have multiple brands, websites, subsidiaries, et cetera. We've come out with enforcement advisories as it relates to data minimization. So if we come out with an enforcement advisory, just assume that that's probably a little bit important to us.
Right.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is that we have announced joint investigatory sweeps with other agencies. So, for example, we came out with a joint sweep announcement with the California Attorney General, who has dual enforcement capabilities with us as it relates to the CCPA. So we're not the only enforcer here in California. The Attorney General is. So, and I can't speak for them about their tactics and their agenda as it relates to that. And then also joining us was Colorado and Connecticut, and that one was about support and usage of the global privacy control, or what we call here in California the opt-out preference signal.
Right.
So if you see a enforcement sweep or investigatory announcement, then you should pay attention to that if you're a business, right? We don't do that just for the sake of coming out with a press release. And then the third and final thing is that in each and every one of our enforcement announcements, we go through the alleged violations in great amount of detail and spell out exactly what this company did that warranted a fine and or a change in business practices as a part of that settlement agreement. And we do that so that other businesses can learn from that.
So clear signal, yes.
So we're telegraphing or signaling through advisories, through investigatory sweeps, through settlement agreements, what we care about. And it's clear that a key focus, it's very obvious that we very much care about consumers' ability to exercise their privacy rights in a frictionless manner. And so we've seen examples of people not supporting the global privacy control. We've seen examples of, for example, entities not actually asking for a lot of information from a consumer so they can simply opt out, right? So there was kind of this imbalance right there. So those are a couple of examples of the sweeps that we and some of the enforcement actions that we've done. And then finally, specific to data brokers, because of the focus of wanting to make sure that all entities are properly registering, we have come forth with a data broker enforcement task force or tiger team or whatever you want to call it. We call it a strike force, where we're kind of surging resources to ensure that the entities that are data brokers are in fact registering with the state. And over the last year, we've come up with over 10 or have had over 10 enforcement actions against data brokers that haven't registered. So that's also something that's an example of a separate type of press release and focus area that we've made quite clear that entities should register if they're a data broker.
Wonderful. Well, I hope my fellow privacy pros have a lot to munch on, and I really appreciate all this time talking about the Drop Platform Delete Act, enforcement, hints, and signals, Tom. But thank you so much for your time, and I am so proud of the work that CalPrivacy is doing for Californians.
Well, thanks a lot, Ron. I mean, I think the key thing for us is that not only do we want to operationalize privacy for consumers, but we want to make sure that businesses can operationalize their requirements as well. And so that's why we're talking to folks like yourself and, just trying to raise awareness of what businesses should be doing, what their obligations under not only the law, but our regulations as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be talking with you here today.
Fantastic, Tom. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Transcend Field Trips. I'm Ron DeJesus. See you out in the field.